Oh, what a beautiful morning. Good evening, Internet. A beautiful evening. It's been a beautiful day. Ah, it's glorious. The 80 something degrees, and I rode the bike around, went down to Weatherford to get my glasses corrected, and then to Fort Worth to go see the teeth people. Got the old twofers all cleaned up today, so have fresh breath for a little bit. Now we started using water picks, and they seem to help a little bit. So we'll see. But anyway, I hope you are having a good day too. It is time. I got way behind, and so let's oh, that's what yesterday was, or yeah, the last video was the wizard and all his little pigs that came out of his hat. Aha. I get the picture now. Do you get the picture? You did watch the last video. You will. Dorothy picks the princess. The words of the cold and moist vegetable prince were not very comforting, and as he spoke them he turned away and left the enclosure. The children, feeling sad and despondent, were about to follow him when the wizard touched Dorothy softly on her shoulder. "Wait," he whispered. "What for?" asked the girl. "Suppose we pick the royal princess," said the wizard. "I'm quite sure she's ripe, and as soon as she comes to life she will be the ruler, and may treat us better than that heartless prince intends to." "All right," exclaimed Dorothy eagerly. "Let's pick her while we have the chance, before the man with the star comes back." So together they leaned over the... Are you recording? Yes, I did push the button. See, old age creeps in once in a while, and you have to double check and make sure you did something. All right, so together they leaned over the great bush, and each of them seized one hand of the lovely princess. "Pull!" cried Dorothy, and as they did so, the royal lady leaned toward them, and the stem snapped and separated from her feet. She was not all that heavy, so the wizard and Dorothy managed to lift her gently to the ground. The beautiful creature passed her hands over her eyes an instant, tucked in a stray lock of hair that had become disarranged, and after a look around the garden made those present a gracious bow and said, in a sweet but even-toned voice, "I thank you very much." "We salute your royal highness," cried the wizard, kneeling and kissing her hand. Just then the voice of the prince was heard calling upon them to hasten, and a moment later he returned to the enclosure, followed by a number of his people. Instantly the princess turned and faced him, and when he saw that she was picked, the prince stood still and began to tremble. "Sir," said the royal lady with much dignity, "you have wronged me greatly, and would have wronged me still more had not these strangers come to my rescue. I have been ready for picking all the past week, but because you were selfish and desired to continue your unlawful rule, you left me to stand silent upon my bush." "I did not know that you were ripe," answered the prince in a low voice. "Give me the star of royalty," she commanded. Slowly he took the shining star from his own brow and placed it upon that of the princess. Then all the people bowed low to her, and the prince turned and walked away alone. What became of him afterward our friends never knew. The people of Mangaboo now formed themselves into a procession and marched toward the glass city to escort their new ruler to her palace and to perform those ceremonies proper to the occasion. But while the people in the procession walked upon the ground, the princess walked in the air just above their heads, to show that she was a superior being and more exalted than her subjects. No one now seemed to pay any attention to the strangers, so Dorothy and Zeb and the wizard let the train pass on and then wandered by themselves into the vegetable gardens. They did not bother to cross the bridges over the brooks, but when they came to a stream, they stepped high and walked in the air to the other side. This was a very interesting experience to them, and Dorothy said, "I wonder why it is that we can walk so easily in the air." "Perhaps," answered the wizard, "it is because we are close to the center of the earth, where the attraction of gravity is very slight. But I've noticed that many queer things happen in fairy countries." "Is this a fairy country?" asked the boy. "Of course it is," returned Dorothy promptly. "Only a fairy country could have vegetable people, and only a fairy country could Eureka and Jim talk as we do." "That's true," said Zeb thoughtfully. In the vegetable gardens they found the strawberries and melons and several other unknown but delicious fruits of which they ate heartily, but the kitten bothered them constantly by demanding milk or meat, and called the wizard names because he could not bring her a dish of milk by means of his magical arts. As they sat upon the grass watching Jim, who was still busily eating, Eureka said, "I don't believe you are a wizard at all." "No," answered the little man. "You are quite right. In the strict sense of the word, I am not a wizard, but only a humbug." "The Wizard of Oz has always been a humbug," agreed Dorothy. "I've known him for a long time." If that is so," said the boy, "how could he do that wonderful trick with the 9 tiny piglets?" "Don't know," said Dorothy, "but it must have been humbug." "Very true," declared the wizard, nodding at her. "It was necessary to deceive that ugly sorcerer and the prince, as well as their stupid people. But I don't mind telling you, you are my friends, that the thing was only a trick." "But I saw the little pigs with my own eyes," exclaimed Zeb. "So did I," purred the kitten. "To be sure," answered the wizard. "You saw them because they were there. They are in my inside pocket now. But the pulling of them apart and pushing them together again was only a sleight of hand trick." "Let's see the pigs," said Eureka eagerly. The little man felt carefully in his pocket and pulled out the tiny piglets, setting them upon the grass one by one, where they ran around and nibbled the tender blades. "They're hungry too," he said. "Oh, what cunning things!" cried Dorothy, catching one and petting it. "Be careful," said the piglet with a squeal. "You're squeezing me." "Dear me," murmured the wizard, looking at his pets in astonishment. "They can actually talk." "May I eat one of them?" asked the kitten in a pleading voice. "I'm awfully hungry." "Why, Eureka," said Dorothy reproachfully, "what a cruel question. It would be dreadful to eat these dear little things." "I should say so," grunted another of the piglets, looking uneasily at the kitten. "Cats are cruel things." "I'm not cruel," replied the kitten, yawning. "I'm just hungry." "You cannot eat my piglets, even if you are starving," declared the little man in a stern voice. "They are the only things I have to prove I'm a wizard." "How did they happen to be so little?" asked Dorothy. "I never saw such small pigs before." "They are from the island of Teenty-Weent," said the wizard, "where everything is small because it's a small island. A sailor brought them to Los Angeles, and I gave him 9 tickets to the circus for them." "But what am I going to eat?" wailed the kitten, sitting in front of Dorothy and looking pleadingly into her face. "There are no cows here to give milk, or any mice, or even grasshoppers. And if I can't eat the piglets, you may as well plant me at once and raise catsup. I have an idea, said the wizard, that there are fishes in these brooks. Do you like fish? Fish! Cried the kitten. Do I like fish? Why, they're better than piglets, or even milk. Then I'll try to catch you some, said he. But won't they be vegetable like everything else here? Asked the kitten. I think not. Fishes are not animals, and they are as cold and moist as the vegetables themselves. There is no reason that I can see why they may not exist in the waters of this strange country. Then the wizard bent a pin for a hook and took a long piece of string from his pocket for a fish line. The only bait he could find was a bright red blossom from a flower, but he knew fishes are easy to fool if anything bright attracts their attention, so he decided to try the blossom. Having thrown the end of his line in the water of a nearby brook, he soon felt a sharp tug that told him a fish had bitten and was caught on the bent pin. So the little man drew in the string, and sure enough, the fish came with it and was landed safely on the shore, where it began to flop around in great excitement. The fish was fat and round, and its scales glistened like beautifully cut jewels set close together. But there was no time to examine it closely, for Eureka made a jump and caught it between her claws, and in a few moments it had entirely disappeared. "Oh, Eureka!" cried Dorothy. "Did you eat the bones?" "If it had any bones, I ate them," replied the kitten composedly, as it washed its face after the meal. "But I don't think that fish had any bones, because I didn't feel them scratch my throat." "You were very greedy," said the girl. "I was very hungry," replied the kitten. The little pigs had stood huddled in a group, watching this scene with frightened eyes. "Cats are dreadful creatures," said one of them. "I'm glad we are not fishes," said another. "Don't worry," Dorothy murmured soothingly. "I'll not let the kitten hurt you." Then she happened to remember that in a corner of her suitcase were 1 or 2 crackers that were left over from her luncheon on the train, and she went to the buggy and brought them. Eureka stuck up her nose at such food, but the tiny piglet squealed delightedly at the sight of the crackers and ate them up in a jiffy. "Now let us get back to the city," suggested the wizard. "That is, if Jem has had enough of the pink grass." The cab horse, who was browsing near, lifted his head with a sigh. "I've tried to eat a lot while I had the chance," said he, "for it's likely to be a long while between meals in this strange country, but I'm ready to go, now, at any time you wish." So, after the wizard had put the piglets back into his inside pocket, where they cuddled up and went to sleep, the 3 climbed into the buggy and Jim started back to the town. "Where shall we stay?" asked the girl. "I think I shall take possession of the house of the sorcerer," replied the wizard, "for the prince said in the presence of his people that he would keep me until they picked another sorcerer, and the new princess won't know but that we belong there." They agreed to this plan, and when they reached the great square, Jim drew the buggy into the big door of the domed hall. "It doesn't look very homelike," said Dorothy, gazing around at the bare room, "but it's a place to stay anyhow." "What are those holes up there?" inquired the boy, pointing to some openings that appeared near the top of the dome. "They look like doorways," said Dorothy, "only there are no stairs to get to them." "You forget that stairs are unnecessary," observed the wizard. "Let us walk up and see where the doors lead to." With this, he began walking in the air toward the high openings, and Dorothy and Zeb followed him. It was the same sort of climb one experiences when walking up a hill, and they were nearly out of breath when they came to the row of openings, which they perceived to be doorways leading into halls in the upper part of the house. Following these halls, they discovered many small rooms opening from them, and some were furnished with glass benches, tables, and chairs. But there were no beds at all. "I wonder if these people never sleep," said the girl. "Why, there seems to be I'm gonna guess there seems to be no night at all in this country," replied Zeb. "Those colored suns are exactly in the same place they were when we came, and if there is no sunset, there can be no night." "Very true," agreed the wizard, "but it is a long time since I have had any sleep, and I'm tired, so I think I shall lie down upon one of these hard glass benches and take a nap." "I will too," said Dorothy, and chose a little room at the end of the hall. Zeb walked down again to unharness Jim, who, when he found himself free, rolled over a few times and then settled down to sleep, with Eureka nestling comfortably beside his big bony body. Then the boy returned to one of the upper rooms, and in spite of the hardness of the glass bench, was soon deep in slumberland. Zeb, what's he up to? The Mangaboos proved dangerous. Ooh. Uh-oh. When the wizard awoke, the 6 colored suns were shining down upon the land of the Mangaboos, just as they'd done ever since his arrival. The little man, having had a good sleep, felt rested and refreshed, and looking through the glass partition of the room, he saw Zeb sitting up on his bench and yawning. So the wizard went in to him. "Zeb," said he, "my balloon is of no further use in this strange country, so I may as well leave it on the square where it fell. But in the basket car are some things I would like to keep with me. I wish you would go and fetch my satchel, 2 lanterns, and a can of kerosene oil that is under the seat. There is nothing else that I care about." So the boy went willingly upon the errand, and by the time he had returned, Dorothy was awake. Then the 3 held a council to decide what they should do next, but could think of no way to better their condition. "I don't like these vegetable people," said the little girl. "They're cold and flabby, like cabbages, in spite of their prettiness." "I agree with you. It is because there is no warm blood in them," remarked the wizard. "And they have no hearts, so they can't love anyone, not even themselves," declared the boy. "The princess is lovely to look at," continued Dorothy thoughtfully, "but I don't care much for her after all. If there was any other place to go, I'd like to go there." "But is there any other place?" asked the wizard. "I don't know," she answered. Just then they heard the big voice of Jim the cab horse calling to them, and going to the doorway leading to the dome, they found the princess and a throng of her people had entered the house of the sorcerer. So they went down to greet the beautiful vegetable lady, who said to them, "I have been talking with many advisors about you meat people, and we have decided that you do not belong in this land of the Mangaboos and must not remain here." "How can we go away?" asked Dorothy. "Oh, you cannot go away, of course, so you must be destroyed," was the answer. "In what way?" inquired the wizard. "We shall throw you 3 people into the garden of the twining vines," said the princess, "and they will soon crush you and devour your bodies to make themselves grow bigger. The animals you have with you we will drive to the mountains and put into the black pit. Then our country will be rid of all its unwelcome visitors." "But you are in need of a sorcerer," said the wizard, "and not one of those growing is yet ripe enough to pick. I am greater than any thorn-covered sorcerer that ever grew in your garden. Why destroy me?" It is true we need a sorcerer, acknowledged the princess, but I am informed that one of our own will be ready to pick in a few days to take the place of Gwig, whom you cut in two before it was time for him to be planted. Let us see your arts and the sorceries you are able to perform. Then I will decide whether to destroy you with the others or not. At this, the wizard made a bow to the people and repeated his tricks of producing the 9 tiny piglets and making them disappear again. He did it very cleverly, indeed, and the princess looked at the strange piglets as if she were as truly astonished as any vegetable person could be. But afterwards she said, I have heard of this wonderful magic, but it accomplishes nothing of value. What else can you do? The wizard tried to think. Then he jointed together the blades of his sword and balanced it very skillfully upon the end of his nose. But even that did not satisfy the princess. Just then his eye fell upon the lanterns and the can of kerosene oil that Zeb had brought from the car of his balloon, and he got a clever idea from those commonplace things. Your Highness, said he, I will now proceed to prove my magic by creating 2 suns that you have never seen before. Also, I will exhibit a destroyer much more dreadful than your clinging vines. So he placed Dorothy upon one side of him and the boy upon the other, and set a lantern upon each of their heads. Don't laugh, he whispered to them, or you will spoil the effect of the magic. Then, with much dignity and a look of vast importance upon his wrinkled face, the wizard got out his matchbox and lighted the 2 lanterns. The glare they made was very small when compared with the radiance of the 6 great colored suns, but still they gleamed steadily and clearly. The Mangaboos were much impressed because they had never seen any light that did not come directly from their suns. Next, the wizard poured a pool of oil from the can upon the glass floor, where it covered quite a broad surface. When he lighted the oil, 100 tongues of flame shot up, and the effect was really imposing. Now, Princess, exclaimed the wizard, those of your advisers who wish to throw us into the garden of clinging vines must step within this circle of light. If they advised you well and were in the right, they will not be injured in any way. But if any advised you wrongly, the light will wither him. The advisers of the princess did not like this test, but she commanded them to step into the flame, and one by one they did so, and were scorched so badly that the air was soon filled with odor like that of baked potatoes. Some of the Mangaboos fell down and had to be dragged from the fire, and all were so withered that it would be necessary to plant them at once. Sir, said the princess to the wizard, you are greater than any sorcerer we have ever known. As it is evident that my people have advised me wrongly, I will not cast you 3 people into the dreadful garden of the clinging vines, but your animals must be driven into the black pit in the mountain, for my subjects cannot bear to have them around. The wizard was so pleased to have saved the 2 children and himself that he said nothing against this decree. But when the princess had gone, both Jim and Eureka protested that they did not want to go to the black pit, and Dorothy promised she would do all she could to save them from such a fate. For 2 or 3 days after this, if we call days the periods between sleep, there being no night to divide the hours into days, our friends were not disturbed in any way. They were even permitted to occupy the house of the sorcerer in peace, as if it had been their own, and to wander in the gardens in search of food. Once they came near to the enclosed garden of the clinging vines, and walking high into the air, looked down upon it with much interest. They saw a mass of tough green vines all matted together and writhing and twisting around like a nest of great snakes. Everything the vines touched they crushed, and our adventurers were indeed thankful to have escaped being cast among them. Whenever the wizard went to sleep, he would take the 9 tiny piglets from his pocket and let them run around on the floor of his room to amuse themselves and get some exercise. And one time they found his glass door ajar and wandered into the hall and then into the bottom of the great dome, walking through the air as easily as Eureka, as easily as Eureka could. They knew the kitten by this time, so they scampered over to where she lay beside Jim and commenced to frisk and play with her. The cab horse, who never slept long at a time, sat upon his haunches and watched the tiny piglets and the kitten with much approval. "Don't be rough," he would call out if Eureka knocked over one of the round, fat piglets with her paw. But the pigs never minded and enjoyed the sport very greatly. Suddenly they looked up to find the room filled with the silent, solemn-eyed Mangaboos. Each of the vegetable folks bore a branch covered with sharp thorns, which was thrust defiantly toward the horse, the kitten, and the piglets. "Here, stop this foolishness," Jim roared angrily. But after being pricked once or twice, he got upon his 4 legs and kept out of the way of the thorns. The Mangaboos surrounded them in solid ranks, but left an opening to the doorway of the hall. So the animals slowly retreated until they were driven from the room and out upon the street. Here were more of the vegetable people with thorns, and silently they urged the now frightened creatures down the street. Jim had to be careful not to step upon the tiny piglets who scampered under his feet, grunting and squealing, while Eureka, snarling and biting at the thorns pushed toward her, also tried to protect the pretty little things from injury. Slowly but steadily the heartless Mangaboos drove them on, until they had passed through the city and the gardens and came to the broad plains leading to the mountain. "What does all this mean, anyhow?" asked the horse, jumping to escape a thorn. "Why, they are driving us toward the black pit, into which they threaten to cast us," replied the kitten. "If I were as big as you, Jim, I'd fight these miserable turnip roots." "What would you do?" inquired Jim. "I'd kick out with those long legs and iron-shod hoofs. All right," said the horse, "I'll do it." An instant later he suddenly backed toward the crowd of Mangaboos and kicked out his hind legs as hard as he could. A dozen of them smashed together and tumbled to the ground, and seeing his success, Jim kicked again and again, charging into the vegetable crowd, knocking them in all directions and sending the others scattering to escape his iron heels. Eureka helped him by flying into the faces of the enemy and scratching and biting ferociously, and the kitten ruined so many vegetable complexions that the Mangaboos feared her as much as they did the horse. But the foes were too many to be repulsed for long. They tired Jim and Eureka out, and although the field of battle was thickly covered with mashed and disabled Mangaboos, our animal friends had to give up at last and allow themselves to be driven to the mountain. Kitty, kitty. Eureka. Chapter 7's next time. Into the black pit and out again. Hey, I didn't get my page marker in there. Hey, let me put my marker in there. Thank you. Oh, well, there you go. All 3 of them are going to be okay for now. But the animals going to the black pit. But the next chapter says out again. How are they going to do that? We'll find out next time. Have a wonderful night. Sweet dreams.